What is up, my friend? Welcome to episode 120 of the Anthony John podcast. And today we're going to be tackling a taboo topic, porn. And I'm bringing on a guest to talk about how to make peace with porn. So if you or someone you know is struggling with porn, even if you're not struggling with porn, this conversation is going to be very, very enlightening. I promise you. So if you're ready to, learn a little bit more about porn and how it can either destroy your life or benefit your life, we really kind of tackle it from both sides. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Anthony John Amix podcast, the one and only podcast designed to help you become unstoppable in life and business. My name is Anthony John Amix. My friends call me AJ, and my goal with this podcast is to help you remember who you truly are so you can maintain your center in the chaos, embody your potential, and unlock freedom in your life and business. That being said, let's get into today's show.
All right, welcome back. Now, before I bring on today's guest, if you want to generate more revenue while working less, living out your big vision, having fun, and doing more of what you love, I have a little something for you. Each week, I set aside a few hours to talk with online entrepreneurs about what's working, what's not working, and really help them create a plan to create their visions faster. So if you want to grab one of those times to talk with me directly, simply go to talkwithaj.com. It's 100% free. Normally, I charge up to $1,000 for a strategy session, but since you're listening to this podcast, I'll hook you up with an opportunity to talk with me. Now, I will warn you, don't book this call if you're not serious about creating results. We will dive deep, and together we will find the root that is preventing you from having the fruit that you want right now. So if you're an online entrepreneur and you're driven and you're hungry and you're ready to create the next level results for yourself, go to talkwithaj.com to grab a time to talk with me now. Now, with that being said, let me tell you about today's guest. His name is Matt Sinkovitz. He runs a community called Making Peace with Porn, and it exists to support men in their journey to liberate themselves from their compulsive relationship with porn. Now, his vision for this community is a conscious brotherhood of 10,000 men working together to cultivate their healthy masculinity, claim their power, and create lives worth living. Now, if you're a woman listening to this episode, I want you to know that we're going to be talking about porn and how it relates to both men and women. So it's not just a men thing. We'll dive into the women's side of that as well. So with that being said, let's bring him onto the show. Matt, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Great to be here, AJ. Thank you.
I saw on your timeline, you're a Buddhist minister, certified Buddhist minister, even though you had a Christian faith upbringing. Tell me a little bit about how that came to pass.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So many of us, I was raised in a Christian, traditional Christian household. And, I was very devout in that faith tradition for most of my youth, up into my 20s or so. And I think like many of us, late teens, early 20s, I kind of began asking a lot of my own questions and stuff like that. And it was actually about mid 20s or so, I got into a really dark place in my life and really depressed, and a lot of just dark thoughts, obsessive thinking, suicidal thinking. And I just wanted some more clarity and understanding as to my own mind. I was feeling a real victim to my mind. And that dark place really led me to a study in mindfulness and meditation, which ultimately led me to Buddhism, and it led me to a local Buddhist meditation group. And I really stuck that out, and then ended up studying and training with my own teacher who runs our local order here, and founded his own kind of Buddhist tradition here in the area. And that's ultimately what led me there. And I really, as I mentioned in that post, actually, I still very much consider myself a man of Christ. I'm very much rooted in the Christian tradition and principles. That was my foundation. I think Buddhism really complements that nicely, and is kind of, I think, an expanded understanding of God and my own spiritual walk.
Dude, I totally understand. I did 10 days of Vipassana, which was intense, kind of immersion into certain Buddhist philosophies. I've studied the Bhagavad Gita, and right now I'm actually reading the Book of Mormon and their two other holy books. I just like studying other religions. And for me personally, I find the more that I open myself up to other religions, the more my Christian faith has more life, and it gives me more practical application. And I always tell a lot of my clients, because they're like, well, how can you do this? I'm like, well, for me, it's kind of like if I only knew Matt, for instance, from the front my entire life, let's call that Christianity. And I go over here and I look at his left side, let's call that Buddhism. And maybe I come over here and look at the right side and we'll call that Mormonism or whatever. the more that I get to learn, the more I'm learning about the totality of God, because let's be honest, it's this infinite thing that for thousands and thousands of years, man has just been doing its best attempt to put language around that's unfathomable, right? So
Right.
I totally understand when you say it strengthens your faith, man. I think it's
Absolutely.
really cool that you're doing that and have been down that path.
Hmm.
Cool,
Thank you,
man.
brother.
Well, today I really want to talk about like making peace with porn. Lots of people aren't talking about this. You're doing that. How did your Christian faith play into your journey into where you're at here, helping men, and we'll talk about helping women too, just kind of make peace with porn.
Yeah. So, okay. So tying my Christian faith into that, so I grew up in the church, and I'm not saying this is what Christianity is, but
Sure.
my experience of, I think, Christianity of the church early on, the conversation around sex was very suppressed. There wasn't a lot of room for that conversation. It was awkward, or it was a joke. You know what I mean? And I really don't think I had a lot of opportunity, or I didn't feel a lot of freedom, or maybe wasn't given a lot of permission to explore my sexuality as a kid. And like many of us, just picked up my first Playboy magazine, like young teens early or something like that, and just got into porn, like I think like a lot of us do, innocently, or maybe it was a friend's videotapes, or however we find it, but that was really it. I didn't have a lot of exposure to that stuff early on, but then I found it, didn't have a lot of room to like talk about it. Certainly hadn't had that conversation. And then just got into it like so many of us. And then, like dial-up internet came into the house, and then high speed, and just kind of just expedited very quickly in my life. You know what I mean? With the advent of those things. So I think that would be the tie. And I think a lot of us have maybe that come from a more religious household, have a more suppressed kind of experience with our sexuality, and we can get off track, pretty easily. And I think that's probably the root of mine.
Totally. And I think you said something that's really important. Like you looked at a Playboy. I did, like when I was probably 10 or 11, I think a buddy of mine stole it from his neighbor or something of that
Exactly.
nature. And it really was an innocence. It really was an innocence. So why do you think so many people put, I don't know, this shame and guilt on sexuality that leads to the shadow of creativity?
Mm. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know, but again, I think a lot of it is inherent in religion in general. I'm not, there's a lot of inherent sin around the idea of sexuality, a lot of control, maybe a lot of oppression, potentially. So I don't know, like where it really originates, but I can say in a lot of religious, conversation. A lot of dogma around sexuality, and yeah, again, maybe earlier on it was used for control and oppression in some ways.
What impact do you feel like pornography is having on men and women around the world right now?
Man, it's quite dark, man. I see it in a lot of men that I work with, and man, impact. I think a lot of mental health issues, a lot of sexual health issues, a lot of social health issues, a lot of spiritual issues, physical issues, maybe how we show up in the bedroom. I think it has impact in almost every area of life. And I think the big challenge is because it has been so suppressed, right? And it is something that lives in the shadow. And there is this energy around it. A lot of people don't feel comfortable coming out and sharing about it. So a lot of men and women, as you mentioned, I think are dealing with it really in their own private life, in the shadows of life. And I think that really adds the fuel to the fire.
Do you think if men are if they just bring to light that they look at pornography,
Yeah.
they talk about it,
Hmm.
that alleviates a lot of the guilt and shame
Right.
associated, that pulls them out of the depression just by opening into a conversation? Or is it more than that?
Oh, I think that's like a great first step. It's just like anybody that's dealing with anything, like whether it's like any kind of recovery, maybe AA or something like that, just coming forth and taking the burden, you know what I mean, off of just yourself and sharing it with others, and kind of just like almost like opening the pressure release valve.
Yeah.
There's something therapeutic and cathartic in just sharing your burdens with others and recognizing that you're not alone.
Do you think a lot of men's we'll call it addiction, I guess, or maybe they're looking at pornography. Is it because they have some deeper need that they aren't tapping into their own agency to create? And I'm not just talking about like a sexual position. I'm going deeper than that. Like for instance, I remember when I used to look at pornography, I really like lesbian pornography. And when I really got curious around it, when I let go of the guilt and shame, and my wife was awesome with this because she's from Romania. And so their relationship to sexuality is vastly different than Americans. It's very, very more open. It's just like, yeah, it's pornography. It's a thing, whatever. Like there's no guilt and shame. It's just like, it is there. So when I get curious about like, well, what am I really desiring from this? Right. Besides like getting off, like, what am I really desiring? What I desired was sensuality. So then when I was able to be like, oh, well, how could I create more sensuality with my wife? And we had conversations around that. Even the desire to go look at lesbian pornography was gone because I was then creating the sensual connection that I wanted to experience with my wife. So my question is, if people got honest, is it just like they have a need that they want to experience and they're using pornography to create that experience, the feeling, rather than leaning into their own agency and questioning like, how could they create that with in integrity with a partner?
Yeah, I think that's huge. So we look at a lot of areas in terms of like, what need am I actually attempting to meet here? So, very often it is sexual, right? The need for intimacy or just, something erotic, and just the hotness of sex, you know what I mean? There might be something in there. And also, I think there's like in the work that we do, the work I've done, and what I've discovered is there's like an emotional intelligence component, right? We might have a need that is not even sexual we are attempting to meet with pornography, just like some people might attempt to meet the needs of other things with cigarettes, food, alcohol, drugs, right? Oftentimes, and so I think it's really important to take a deep look at, all right, let's pause for a minute. What am I, like you said, actually attempting to accomplish here? Maybe I'm feeling lonely. Maybe I'm feeling disconnected. Maybe I'm feeling anxious. Maybe I'm feeling tired, So there's a whole spectrum of needs that we have conditioned ourselves to actually go to pornography in order to attempt to meet.
Yeah, we talked about this in Project Shift, and one of the programs I run. We touch on porn and sexuality very briefly, nothing like you do at all. And we were just putting together this personal development program, and we had to touch on sex, like we had to. And one of the things we talked about was the dopamine hit that people get from pornography, and how when people are addicted to pornography, they may not be addicted to pornography. They're addicted to the dopamine hit because it is the easiest, fastest way to gain dopamine hits through masturbation and pornography. Would you agree with that?
Big time. Yeah, great drug.
Yeah, it's so good. So what are people to do about it? If like part of the human experience is we want to experience dopamine, we want to increase our levels of dopamine. What do we do? Do we just resist this thing called pornography, or is there a different way to make peace about it?
That's a good question, man. And I think there are a number of approaches to this. I think that the best and the healthiest answer to that is, again, a process we use is a mindfulness-based approach. So it's like really taking a pause and taking a time out and saying, okay, let's work to identify what I'm actually needing in this moment. And it might be a sexual need, which we would encourage, brothers and sisters to meet in a healthy way, right? Like how do we identify this need first of all, and how do we now work to meet that need in a healthier way? Maybe if I'm tired, I actually need some rest. I'm feeling disconnected and I've identified that. Maybe I actually want, true healthy connection, maybe I need to address the actual anxiety that's going on inside of me. So how do we now meet those needs in a healthier way, I think is really what we're working to accomplish.
So is it similar to maybe, I've never smoked cigarettes or anything like that. I've never been down that path, but I've heard people say when they would smoke and they wanted to quit, they would replace the habit with a different option. Like, oh, I have a need to smoke. Let me put a piece of gum in my mouth. And so they replaced a habit with a habit. Yeah. And so let's say if somebody has a go-to habit of they feel stressed or they're tired, and like, oh, I'm going to go to pornography to help me alleviate this pressure that I'm feeling, the tiredness, the pressure, the stress. Is it as simple as like, oh, well, rather than going to that, I'm going to go to a breathing technique or a meditation and just replace a habit with a habit? Is it that simple or different?
Well, it is that simple in theory, I think, but for anybody that's maybe listening or maybe in your own personal experience, AJ, that impulse and that desire to go to the pornography is very strong, man. That, like I said, it's a good drug, man. So I think it is that simple, but the restraint required and the discipline and the commitment to something greater. We focus a lot on the why, like what do we actually want instead, the commitment to make a different choice really requires a lot. I think a lot of emotional resilience. Yeah.
So, what would you encourage somebody to do if they're struggling with porn addiction? What would you encourage them to do? Like, what are the steps that you would kind of guide them through? We don't have to go deep, but just kind of at a high level. What are the steps to kind of,
hmm
I don't know, to take back their power, where they're the one in control, where they're the one either doing porn or not doing porn, but porn's not doing them?
Yeah. So like it is, I think, a more in-depth conversation, but just to be like brief here for the sake of our conversation, I think the most important thing to do, I could give you like a couple little nuggets, but I think the most important thing that anybody that wants to end the relationship with porn for good, which I think is ultimately that anybody that has a relationship with porn that they may qualify as addictive or compulsive, you want to know that it's behind you for good. um, I think the most important thing that anybody can do, aside from skills, like how to, but the first step is really to identify your why, and in our work together, we identify, like, the why is being broken down into two things. First of all, we have to identify the pain and the destruction that porn is creating in our life, right? Because it is a hell, it is a prison of sorts for those who have experienced any form of like severe addiction. Addiction to pornography can be a real hell. We can feel really enslaved by it. So getting really crystal clear on the destruction it's creating in our life, and the second part of the why would be to create a crystal clear vision for what we want to experience differently. And that those two pieces comprise our why. So it's like we can have all the commitment, we can have all the accountability, we can have all the community, we can have all the tools, which are all pieces of our puzzle. But if we don't have a powerful reason, a powerful motivator, then I think none of that matters.
What would be a powerful reason? Because I imagine somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, this is something I do on my downtime.
hmm
Like it's something I can do in the shadow. So it's not that big of a deal. Like, what would you tell them is on the other side of that? Because I believe a lot of people don't even know what's on the other side, what's
hmm
possible for them on the other side.
Yeah. Well, I think that is the trick. First of all, we come from a pretty, I think, unique approach that says we don't just demonize pornography. Some people are able to maintain a healthy relationship with it, and we honor that. So if maybe you're just using porn once in a while and it's cool with you, or maybe using it as a couple and it's cool, and you don't experience like adverse, emotional, spiritual, kind of physical issues, then I think the first thing is really to determine if it is creating like suffering in your life. Some signs of that, again, might be low energy. Maybe it's having an adverse emotional effects, depression, anxiety, fear, disconnect, loneliness, social awkwardness, sexual potential issues. Those could be some signs. Low feelings of self-worth, low self-confidence. So I would say if you have any of those things, then we could go on and on, right? Um, those would be some signs. Poor sexual performance in the bedroom. Maybe you're not aroused by your partner, and maybe you used to be. You know what I mean? Maybe you're going to porn a lot throughout the day, and then by the time you get home, or by the time it's time to connect in a healthy way, in a way that you might desire, you're not able or not interested. All these things might be signs. And again, we could go on about that. But on the other side of that, a lot of the, in my own personal experience and the experience of a lot of the brothers that I've had the opportunity to see in their own journey, is like renewed energy, a renewed lust for life, new inspiration, motivation coming back, a greater sense of confidence and self-worth, like I would say an overall sense of reinvigoration of life. Because what we're doing with the pornography is one where I think we're dumping a lot of our life force, like vital energy, down the drain. And we're also, instead of getting maybe like something that we're needing, we're actually just putting the toxicity of porn, you know what I mean, into our soul.
Mm.
So not only are we dumping out that life force energy, I think we're replacing it with something that's really quite toxic. So does that answer your
Oh,
question?
yeah, yeah. And if somebody was going to hold on to their life force energy, like, What would they do with it? Like, I don't know if you've ever read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. They talk about sexual energy or sexual transmutation.
Yeah.
So like, what is somebody supposed to do with this life force energy if it's not sex?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So this whole idea of sex transmutation, and right, and we hear about semen retention, and there's all these practices and tantra and all these different things. So we teach like three things. What do we do with this impulse? What do we do with this urge when it strikes? So like really, very simply, the three kind of ideas or suggestions we might have. One, first, I think, and very importantly, is learn to be with that emotion, be with that energy, be with that impulse. Just like if anybody here has had an addictive or compulsive relationship in the past with cigarettes or some other thing, maybe it's food, we can see and notice whenever the feeling, the impulse, the urge, right, arises in the body as energy, right, and the willingness to kind of be with that energy, right? Maybe there's something to learn. Maybe we need to like re-engage with our emotions, and maybe there's something there for us. But either way, just noticing and being like the willingness, like to be with that energy, to be with that emotion. I've heard some people say that children cannot handle their emotions, you know what I mean? But men, we have to learn to mature and learn to be with that emotion. But we've adopted like this habit of running away from that emotion or dumping that emotion off, at such an early age. So I think the first and foremost thing is to be with that emotion. Again, we teach, mindfulness and meditation just to learn to be with that emotion. We can watch as the emotion energy rises, and we can watch as the energy and the emotion falls again and goes away. So just to be with that is, I think, super important. Number two, and just as good of an option, is to actually connect in a healthy sexual way, either with a partner or through healthy forms of masturbation and self-pleasure. That would be number two, is to actually release that. And number three, getting to your point of the sex transmutation, and I think a great idea. We focus so much in our work on vision and why. Like, what else do you want instead? So that is literally our life force energy. Like, we literally create life with this energy. So if we can redirect that energy into the life we want to live and the man that we want to be. But we have to clarify that vision for ourselves, or else we don't know what to do with that energy.
So good. Now I want to go back to the first point of being with the energy.
Yeah.
I think in such a powerful thing. I know one of my biggest breakthroughs that I had probably within the past 3 years was just being with sexual energy. I was leading an event, and we do this exercise where we called Come Go. And Come Go, it's not a sexual thing at all. You have two people that are they can be close, they can be afar, and you're telling them to come close or go away. Mm-hmm. And this person can choose to either come close or go away. And we encourage participants to play in their edge. And so I had this really beautiful woman in front of me. And so I had her come close, and I could feel the sexual energy. And I think for a lot of men, when they feel the sexual energy, and I'm going to use a word here just to be direct, to make a point. They believe they have to fuck the energy, but they don't. Like, you can just like be with a tree and be like, gosh, what a beautiful tree. Or you can be with a mountain and just breathe it in. Just like, you can just appreciate it without having to need to do anything sexual.
Yes.
And this was so liberating for me, that this woman gave me the experience, and there was no sexualness there of attraction. It was just like me just breathing in her feminine life force energy, her breathing in my masculine life force energy. There was no adultery, no fornication. It was just being with the energy. And I think so many people, especially that come from Christian faith, unfortunately, they don't give themselves permission to be with the energy because they have a story and meaning that it's bad, or there's guilt, or there's shame, or it means something about them, or they're a sinner, or God's going to look down on them. And my experience has been that is not the God that I've experienced by any means or read about. Like, it's just fucking energy for us to be with. And it's liberating when we can be with it. I'm kind of on my preacher's hat right now.
I love it. Amen, brother. Go ahead and preach. Yeah, right on, man. Yep.
Awesome. So how can we encourage more men and women to just be with the experience of their experience without it having to mean anything?
Yeah. So I think that kind of it comes to a point in our own awareness, in our own consciousness, in our own understanding that we don't have to react to every thought and every feeling and every emotion that comes up.
So good.
We can simply choose to observe. We can simply choose to be, or to notice and observe and be with, and maybe be curious about it. Like you said, I think it's a matter of emotional maturity in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
What can we do as like people who understand this, and we have children? We know children, like my daughter, she's 2 years old and 2 months old. She has more access to sexual content like at the palm of her hand than I ever did growing up.
Mhm.
So what do we do as parents to help navigate this besides just having an open conversation to encourage them to be with it? Like, what advice do you have?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and quite a it's a quandary in today's society. We have to figure that out. So I think all the basic stuff, like you mentioned, maybe the app blockers, maybe limiting screen time, having that conversation. But at the end of the day, I think as a parent, you can have all that conversation you want with the kid, but if a young boy gets his hands on his cell phone or computer, and it's just so intoxicating and so exciting as a kid. So I don't know, man. I think a big piece of it, if you ever watch like The Social Dilemma, right? Um, at the end of that, all the owners of the big tech social media companies are saying, you know what? I don't let my kids have a screen at all. You know what I mean? Until they're like 18, because it is so intoxifying and intoxicating, and it is created in order to attract us, in order to pull us in. So I don't know. I think really that would be my call as a parent. I'm not a parent yet, but to really be very intentional about my child's screen time and interaction with social
Awesome.
media and that phone, and all that. I think that would probably be the most. And of course, just like neutralize this conversation around sex, normalize the conversation around sex. I think so many kids feel as though it's weird, it's awkward, they can't have that conversation with the parents, or they're going to get in trouble, or there's something wrong with them. But I think just allow kids to experience themselves naturally, and just to have a healthy conversation and experience with sex and their sexuality would probably be just as, if not more important.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree. Normalizing the conversation,
Yeah.
normalizing sexuality in general. I know the approach that we'll take with my daughter, and there's a paradox to this. And what I mean by that, it's like, yes, it's my job as a father to protect her innocence, and at the same time, have enough awareness. And I don't think there's a black and white science, but having enough awareness to like check in with what I call it God, you call it spirit, universe, consciousness. I call it God, and trust like where I'm being guided. And if it's like she has the capacity to, go certain places to allow her, but also hold the space to be able to have those conversations. So if she's wanting to experience sex with a partner, to be like, well, what need are you wanting to experience?
Yeah.
And being willing to have some of these conversations rather than being like, nope, you can't do that until you're 18. Nope, you can't do that until you're 21. Nope, not yet. I have to stay curious and be like, babe, what do you got going on? What are you wanting to experience? What need do you have?
Hmm.
And be open to co-creating a win-win from a very young age. So it's just a way of being. It's a relationship that I have with my daughter. I could be wrong, but that's kind of the boat I'm in at the moment, and we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I dig it, man. I think all of us are in a new situation. These I would say the generation that's come in, whatever, the past 10 years or so. Like I think you and I, brother. I know I was born, and for the first 15 or so years of my life, I did not even have a computer in the house.
Yep,
So these newer generations that are coming along here, they're all being born with one of these in their hand almost.
totally.
So that's a new thing we have to all navigate as humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. And who's to say, and I don't know, just going way out here down the rabbit hole on this, who's to say their soul didn't come to this planet with a whole new level of capacity that
Hmm.
you and I didn't have,
I'm
you
with you
know?
on that, man. I'm with you on that, 100%.
And so, yeah, man, it's different things for different people, of course, but I think it's just our job as a parent is to make sure our inputs are really good. So we have the space and the capacity to just be in the fire with them, not to
Hmm.
make them wrong or guilt or shame, but just to seek to understand, to
Yeah,
to
yeah, brother.
observe and help navigate, and us demonstrate as well the values that we choose to stand for.
Hmm.
So switching gears, I know there's a lot of talk about men in pornography. I don't see a whole lot, but I also haven't looked for it about women in pornography. Do women struggle with pornography the same way men do?
I think they do, AJ, and so you can Google, right? You could do some research, and you'll find all kind of stats that discuss how many women or what percentage of women actually use porn or use it regularly, or say they have an addictive relationship with porn. So again, I think the what do you say, the whatever is still out on that. The jury's still maybe out on that,
Yep.
because I think it's a newer conversation, right? um, but I can say in my own experience, because I've been having this conversation openly more, a lot of times women will reach out to me personally, or they'll comment on some of my posts, that women definitely do deal with this. I do think men and women have a different relationship with it. I'm not saying that it's always different across the board, but it seems I don't see the addictive quality for it in women the same way I do in men. But of course, I'm not a woman, so I don't know. It seems as though women don't have such an addictive tendency for porn, but I definitely know that there are a significant amount of women that use porn regularly, and that there are definitely a portion of women who have an addictive relationship with it, and several have reached out to me sharing that personally. They're like, "Hey,
Awesome.
this is not just a man thing."
Awesome. And, we've talked about like the shadow of porn. I went through a course by David Dita about masculinity and polarity and all of that. And
Yeah.
he was an advocate that porn, if used consciously, could be a great tool for men. He wasn't
Hmm.
prescribing it for men, but he was just talking around, hey, it could be a tool for you.
Yep.
How could pornography be used as a tool to actually evolve our soul and our consciousness and connection to life force?
Hmm. Yeah, that's good. So you were talking about sex transmutation earlier. David Dida, I believe he did What Way of Superior Man, right?
Correct,
And
correct.
and yeah, he was one of the earlier ones that I saw talking about this conversation. So I'm going to say that I'm not an expert on that, because for me, again, I always had this addictive, compulsive relationship with porn. So for me, it wasn't a healthy thing. It'd be like an alcoholic trying to have a couple beers. It just doesn't
Sure,
work.
sure.
I can say I have spoken with and encountered and had much conversation with many men who one have a healthy relationship with porn. They're like, yeah, I use it once in a while. It's good. It's therapeutic. I just kind of use it when I want to relax. Or couples use it within their relationship, and it seems to work really well. And they're like, we dig it as a couple, and I think that's great, and I honor that. Um, I also I was on like a mastermind call about 2 weeks ago, and there's a brother on there who uses porn. He does not masturbate with it, but he uses it to kind of arouse himself in different ways, and he induces um, that kind of orgasm that David Dida talks about, where you kind of move the
Yep.
spinal column, that whole thing. He uses that, and he kind of massages his body and does this whole kind of sensual thing while watching porn. He never touches himself in the genitals, and he's like, for me, he's like, after I'm done, I feel invigorated, I feel energized, and it's like a good, healthy thing. So again, I really honor everyone's kind of own individual experience and journey with it.
Awesome, man. What has been your biggest breakthrough personally around porn?
My biggest breakthrough personally, yeah, I would say again, what I referenced earlier is really getting clear on the why. I think really getting clear on the needs that we talked about earlier, just the awareness, like, what am I actually wanting and needing in this moment? I still have moments where, like, I'm laying in bed late at night, I can't sleep. Maybe I ate too late. I'm just kind of there tossing and turning. My phone's over across the room. I still have the impulse and urge to look at porn. Um, so I think, like, in those moments, like, learning to check in with myself and say, all right, what am I wanting and needing? Sometimes I'm just noticing that I'm looking for stimulation.
Mm,
So I think awareness around what needs we're actually attempting to meet. And I think accountability within community is so important, to the piece. I feel like I almost have an unfair advantage in the work that I do, because the work that I do holds me to such a high level of integrity in my own journey and relationship with porn. So community and accountability, so important. um, and I think the real kind of golden key beyond that would just be recognizing that, like people were always like, what's the secret? What's the one thing? For me, it's like a willingness to be with that emotion, to be with that, maybe it's pain, to be with that energy and just bear with it, even if it means maybe you're suffering a bit, maybe you're crying, maybe you're feeling lonely, maybe, you know what I mean? Like really a willingness to bear the suffering, and that emotion, that energy will move through and process, I think, in a healthy way if we are willing to do so. But quitting porn is not easy, I don't think, for anybody that has this type of relationship with it. And like you said, man, just a willingness to be with that and bear the suffering, and it will subside and it will decrease after time, and you will also become better at dealing with it.
And living in the sufferings. I know you're in the Buddhist ministry,
Yeah.
and suffering comes from attachment. Suffering comes from us either craving, we'll stay on topic here, craving pornography, or like resisting the aversion of like, I can't. So Buddhist philosophy would just be like, well, be with what is, which is your offering, the sadness, the frustration, the stress, and so many people don't know how to be with, unfortunately. It's not something we're taught. And I have spent the past decade learning how to be with anything.
Right, man. Yeah, brother.
Anything. And for me, it comes back to this breathing, just being with the breath and living in the question. I think you said very vulnerably, like one of the things you want is stimulation sometimes, is stimulation. And so I wonder, like, if we can become aware and just be with, man, there's a part of me that wants some stimulation right now. If we can just live in the pocket with it and live in the question of like, well, how could I create stimulation? I could do pornography. That could be an option.
Yep.
But I'm willing not to do that right now. So how else could I create stimulation? How else could I experience? And maybe just by being with and living in the question and staying in that place of childlike curiosity, maybe a little answer drops in that we're able to pursue a different path to experience that which we feel called to, which is stimulation.
Absolutely.
Potentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. So often, like in those moments, man, it's just a deep breath, just breathing in. I kind of teach a technique, just kind of breathing up from the genitals into the belly, a big full belly breath, breathing into the heart, and just being with that for a minute, man. And oftentimes that's it, just allowing it to pass, rather than resisting it or running away from it,
I do know. I teach something we call the core power process. And essentially it's like, we all have thoughts, right? It's like if I told you, hey, Matt, don't think right now. Like there's no possible way you're going to think. Like you're not even the thinker of your thoughts. Like you have thoughts. It's going to happen. Right. But from those thoughts, we start experiencing from emotions, and emotions start creating belief systems, stories, and meanings. And this is where people get trapped, is they don't allow themselves to surrender to their experience. You said be with your experience. I would say surrender to your experience, because what happens is they have thoughts, they have emotions, guilt, shame. They're like, oh, this means this about me. God's gonna be mad at me, or whatever their stories and meanings are, which then perpetuate more thoughts and more emotions and more belief systems. And they get stuck in this ever evolving pressure loop that's just building and building and building and building and building until that pressure just erupts. And the solution really is, and it's a simple solution, simple to do, simple not to do. Surrender to what you're experiencing.
Yes, brother. Yes. And I use the word suffering, but maybe an even better word is just be with the pain. Be willing to be with the pain. Recognize that life is not always, like in the symphony, there are highs and lows. And I think a healthy human is willing to be with the ebbs and flows of life,
Well, dude, and I would even challenge labeling it as pain or labeling it as suffering is still stories and meaning.
Yeah. Yep.
To truly be with is to be without stories and meaning. It just is.
Yeah.
Now, we may label it pain, we may label it suffering, but if we rise above that and really become the observer chooser, it just is.
Yes, absolutely.
And in that experience, the emotion is nothing more than energy in motion. It passes, whether it's 15 seconds or 90 seconds or 12 minutes, like it will pass. This too shall pass. Yeah. It always does. And in the place of the passing, what I have experienced personally, and all of my clients, when they go through the core power process, is a void opens up. A void opens up where God can pour in some inspiration, where we can actually take inspirational action.
Yes.
But part of that is living in the question. But the only way to live in the question is to be with the experience that opens up the space for us to actually be in a place of receiving an empowered answer.
I think in that space is also the space of expansion.
Yes. Your expansion's certain.
Yeah.
Like it's like your expansion is inevitable if we're willing to be with the experience, whatever the experience is. It could be peace and joy. It could be sadness and anger and apathy and wanting to shoot myself in the face. I personally have experienced all of those.
Right.
They're just an experience. And in the experience, there's always light if I'm willing to be there.
Amen.
To bring some science to this, I found this interesting. There's this physics experiment called the low road, high road. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But essentially, you have two tracks. One is the high road. It's a kind of pretty much a straight point from point A to point B, a little tilted, but pretty much straight. And the other one's kind of like a half pipe, right? Half pipe. And you drop two balls at the same time, two stainless steel balls. And you'd ask people like, well, which one would make it to the other side fastest? If you're anything like me, or I originally saw this experiment, I was like, straightest path, the crow flies, straight path. That's the fastest path, right? So they released the balls, and lo and behold, I was completely wrong. The low road, the ball that drops into the pit, picks up momentum and beats the straight road by far, and starts picking up more momentum. More momentum.
Very interesting.
And so I believe, like if we've ever studied Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins and the Scale of Consciousness, to the degree that we're willing to accept our death is to the degree in which we can live.
Yes.
So meaning in this game of shadow work, if I'm willing to be with my shadow and go to the pit with myself, not to fix it, just to be with it, to experience it, to understand it. That's me going down the low road. And in physics, what happens is the potential that's stored within the ball, when it's moving, it's converted into kinetic energy. So I believe when we're willing to be with the things that we're like, no, I don't want to be with that part of myself. When we're willing to experience that part of ourselves as an experience in our bodies, what happens is we drop down and our potential is turned into kinetic energy, which propels us into love and service. And we have more and more agency, more and more capacity to be at cause in our lives. Is this making sense?
Amen, brother.
Super powerful stuff, man. Like
it is.
I've been with I am weak. I have been with I am mediocre. I've been with, man, I want to kill myself. I've been with that one too. Like I've been with as much as my shadows as I can be with. I'm not saying I go out looking for them. My subconscious releases them. Science has proven our subconscious releases things into our conscious when it knows we have the capacity to be with it. Scripture talks about those who trust in him, like only good things can happen. Totally butchered the quote there from 1 Corinthians, I believe it's 13. But it's true. Like we have the capacity to be the light in the darkness. It's only our stories and meanings that keep us from being with.
Right.
And if we're willing to take what you're sharing here today, which is to be with it, that's where we find liberation.
Yeah, I dig that so much, man. I've heard that the pit and the peak kind of analogy stated by Garrett J. White. I don't know if you know with the Warrior program, but he always talks about the depth of our pit will determine the height of our peak. You know what I mean? And I think, as you said, being willing, maybe even to go into the pits of hell with whatever we're experiencing. And yes, that absolutely opens us up, man.
Absolutely, dude. And the crazy thing is hell is just our stories and meanings.
Absolutely.
Like when we go to the pit, it just is. And our feet hit the ground and we're like, wow, it's really not that bad here. Like the best way I can illustrate it's like in a backyard, like in a suburban backyard, they usually have those L-shaped backyards here in America. And they usually have the swing set in the bigger rectangular part of the backyard. And there's the floodlights. And let's say there's two children playing on that swing set at nighttime and they want to play hide and seek. Well, one of them is like looking over at the darkness, like, man, it's scary over there, but I bet it would be a good hiding place. But they're too scared to go into the darkness because who knows what's in the darkness? Well, eventually they get up enough courage, they go into the darkness. And when they get into the darkness, their eyes adjust and they realize, well, there's some trash cans and some air conditioning units over here. It's really not that bad. Some gravel. There's some really good hiding spots. And they can still look out to the light and see there. And what has happened since their eyes have adjusted and they have the courage to be in both the light and the dark, their capacity to express themselves has just been exponentially increased. And this is what happens with us as humans when we're willing to go to the pit, when we're willing to go with the shadows, when we're willing to be with. The capacity that we have to experience the totality of God flowing through us exponentially expands.
Yeah. I think a really important point on that, man, because I think we're getting into some really good stuff here, is like that feeling, that emotion, should we be willing to be with it, is really like our power. Yeah. So much of the conversation that we have with the brothers is like, how much can you handle? Like I see so many brothers, they'll go to 30, 35, 40, they'll get really close to this benchmark and then they'll go back down again. But it's like, there has to be a point in your journey when you're willing to be with that power, because it really is like that. I think also expands our capacity, the willingness to be with that,
I totally agree. The best way I could describe it, it's like, think of like an 8-inch water pipe. If we're like anger, nope, I don't do anger. Angry people hurt people. We just constricted the flow of that pipe. Sexual energy, nope, God's not sexual. No, I don't do sexual energy. That's not right. We just constricted the flow. And before we know it, when we have the capacity of an 8-inch pipe or a 40-inch pipe, there's no right length or diameter, but we're just like trickling because we have these stories and meanings of like, nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. And what's helped me understand, and this is just my belief system, is God is all of it. God is all of it and God is none of it. Welcome to the paradox. So anytime I'm like, hey, I don't do anger, essentially I'm saying, hey, God, fuck you. I don't let anger come through this body.
Right.
Oh, sexuality, God, fuck you. I don't let sexuality come through this vessel. And God's going like, yo, I love you, bro. I want to express through you in a healthy way.
And you're made perfectly.
And you're made perfectly.
Yeah.
And so people are like, well, AJ, how do I allow the totality of God, the totality of my power to come through me without it causing chaos and destruction? The game's really simple. You have values that govern your life. And you have the ability to choose to walk in integrity with those values. And the integrity and the values are the riverbanks that allow you to channel the totality of God through you to allow you to create your unique purpose, your unique expression on earth. The moment that we forget this and we do not walk in integrity with our values is the moment that the riverbank collapses and all of that water flows out and smashes cities and creates destruction. So it's not the emotions that harm people. It's our lack of taking responsibility to walk in integrity with our values, not our fathers or our mothers or societies or churches, our values, the ones that we choose. And when we do that, we can actually wield the totality of our power in a very healthy, very powerful, very responsible way.
Love it, dude. And I think when we are out of integrity with those values, that is also the space of suffering.
Yeah, I would totally agree. That's where the guilt, the shame comes in.
Yeah.
Because we know better. And this is where we also get to have grace and unconditional love for ourselves.
Yeah, brother.
To put back up that wall. And right or wrong and say, hey, whoa, I crossed the line. I was wrong. Eat crow. Like we're gonna survive eating crow. It's gonna be okay. Awesome.
So this energy, this emotion that we're talking about, we're talking about power. I think being with that power, and a great question we ask our brothers is, how good can you stand it? How good can you handle it? How much of that can you withstand? Then the more we're willing to do so, I think the more that capacity does expand, and our capacity to deal with that, increases.
Yeah, dude. If you could go back in time and give yourself some wisdom that would help you collapse time and get results faster, what would you tell him, man?
Oh, man, That's tough again, because I do believe that our path is perfect. I do believe our path is perfect, and maybe my path put me here, for the purpose of this conversation today. So
Sure.
I honor and recognize that potential as well. But I don't know, man. I think I think at an earlier age, just having a healthier understanding and relationship with my own sexuality, and kind of maybe recognizing where my relationship with porn might go,
Yeah.
the trajectory of that, and the impacts it might have on my life. That awareness may have been helpful to me at a younger age.
Awesome, man. And if people if they're struggling with pornography, maybe they know somebody who is, or maybe they're a woman, like how can they get in contact with you? I know you run a community. I know you're all about making peace with porn. Like how can they get in contact with you and get plugged into what you got going on?
Yeah, thanks so much, brother. So I do run a community on Facebook. It's a private community. We are just men. It's called Making Peace with Porn. So we've got a lot of great conversation and training and community going on over there. If you're looking for, and you can connect with me on Facebook that way as well, Matt Sinkovitz. And if you're looking for something more private, you can also just shoot me an email directly to makingpeacewithporn@gmail.com.
Awesome, dude. Well, dude, Matt, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you, brother.
Dude, it was a great conversation. My honor to be here.
Yes, sir. Well, there you have it, my friend, Matt Sinkovitz and Making Peace with Porn. This conversation was straight up fire, and I loved every second of it. Like, it really brought the preacher out of me a little bit. Now, I know if you're struggling with porn, this conversation is filled with massive amounts of wisdom to help you liberate yourself from that addiction. Like, truly, I mean, it is packed full of gold. It was raw, it was vulnerable, and it was very practical. And I hope you really enjoyed this conversation. So that's all I have for you in this episode of the Anthony John Amos podcast. I hope it served you. I hope it's inspired you. And I hope it's really helped you find a way to make peace with porn on one level or another. Now, if you know someone who needs to hear this episode, send it over to them. Like, send it to them in their DM, screenshot it, share it on your social medias, like whatever you need to do. Send them an email, text message, whatever you got to do to get this episode into their ear holes. Like, this was a great episode. Also, keep the 5-star reviews coming over on iTunes, because that is what helps get the show found by more people. So thank you so much for being here. Until next time, I'm out. Peace.
Well, that's all I've got for this episode of the Anthony John Amos podcast, but we have plenty more to help you become unstoppable in life and business. So head on over to ajamix.com for exclusive resources, information, and tools to help you break through to a new level of freedom, purpose, and success. I look forward to having you back for the next episode. Bye for now.